There were precisely two types of planets in the known galaxy. The first type, warm, breathable, lush, peaceful. The sort of places where the sunsets came with a musical score, and every second flower tried to sell you scented candles. These planets were colonized, gentrified, and thoroughly ruined by about 5 different empires, one after the other. The second type, the Deathworlds. These were not conquered, they were survived. Barely. Flarnock beasts that could digest titanium. Atmospheric storms that insulted you before disintegrating your ship. Continents that moved when no one was watching. The kind of planets where, if you set up a research station, the research station would file for leave and escape in a shuttle without you. So naturally, when the Galactic Dominion set out to conquer every Deathworld, they didn't send in scientists or diplomats. They sent in Team Banshee, a squad so legendarily reckless they once declared war on an asteroid for orbiting aggressively. Their leader, a towering brute of polished exosteel named Commodore Threxil Von, had personally wrestled a magma serpent on Yerk 3, mostly because it spilled his drink. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Krieb, was a neurotic tactician who never blinked, which made everyone very uncomfortable. He also had the disturbing habit of whispering strategies to vending machines. And then there was Unit 7 Lark, a sentient drone who insisted it was not sentient, but did once compose a haiku about its own existential dread. It currently stored that poem in its emergency kill routine. Together, they conquered Deathworlds 1 through 39, each one bloodier, nastier, and more needlessly dramatic than the last. Until they discovered planet SO40L, buried in the ancient registries under a category labeled "Do Not Engage," under audit. Audit? They laughed. That was the moment everything began to unravel. You see, 040L, also known by its local designation Earth, wasn't actually forgotten. It had been deliberately hidden, not because of any advanced weaponry, not because its inhabitants had some strategic importance, but because Earth had something far worse. Anomaly Level 7. Illogicality. No one really knew what that meant. The file was corrupted, possibly on purpose, possibly by the planet itself. So naturally, Commodore Von, swollen with hubris and a diet made entirely of synthetic protein bars and unearned confidence, declared, "By this time next cycle, Earth shall kneel before us." To which Lieutenant Krieb responded, "Why is there a planet classified under a filing error? That's not standard." And Unit 7 Lark, with quiet horror, whispered, "My death protocol just updated itself to hope." They ignored the omens. They always ignored the omens. On approach, Earth didn't respond to hails. Not unusual. Some planets were shy, others were dead, a few were playing hard to get. But Earth just broadcast one thing on every frequency, in every language. A looping video of a man slipping on a banana peel and falling into a pond full of ducks. The ducks applauded. They debated whether this was a threat, a trap, or performance art. Commodore Von found it amusing. "Primitive humor," he scoffed, sipping his 4th battle espresso. That night, the stars above Earth looked nervous. The crew joked. They speculated. They polished their weapons and charged their sarcasm detectors. But something ticked. Something beneath the planet's blue swirl and green patches radiated unease. Unit 7. Lark locked itself in the escape pod and refused to come out. Krieb began twitching in Morse code, and Von? He issued his famous final pre-invasion speech. "We have conquered planets made of acid. We've outwitted telepathic lava. We survived 12 hours in a room with the diplomatic corps of Blurg Zeta. We are unstoppable. This is Earth. How bad could it possibly be?" The answer would arrive exactly 13 minutes later, in the form of an airborne plastic lawn chair, hurled with ballistic precision by a 7-year-old child named Trevor, during what he believed to be a game of space tag. Commodore Von was knocked out cold before he hit the pavement. And somewhere, in the galactic archives, the old "Do Not Engage" tag quietly updated itself to run. The chair, later identified as a deluxe patio lounger from a suburban hardware chain, was recorded traveling at 38 kilometers per hour, propelled entirely by the raw kinetic fury of a small, sticky-fingered earthling named Trevor. The Galactic Dominion had never trained for this. Their simulations covered plasma warfare, black hole diplomacy, and how to survive prolonged exposure to karaoke. But no one had ever accounted for projectile furniture. Vaughn lay unconscious, twitching slightly, as Krieb tried to make sense of the situation using a tactical protocol designed for hostile nebulae. The child deployed the object before initiating verbal contact, he mumbled, pacing in frantic geometric patterns. This is not warfare. This is recreational violence. Trevor, meanwhile, was being scolded by his older sister for hitting the weird Tin Man too hard. She did this while continuing to eat a popsicle and recording the incident on her phone, which was immediately uploaded to a site called FaceFlap. Within 12 minutes, the footage had more views than the Galactic High Council's entire fleet unveiling ceremony. Earth's population had not noticed an invasion. They noticed a strange man in shiny armor faint in a parking lot. Sure. But it was a Sunday, and the Wi-Fi was working. So naturally, no one really cared. In fact, one local news outlet ran a story with the headline, "Tourist Suffers Heat Stroke, Blames Child's Lawn Chair." Lieutenant Krieb attempted to initiate first contact with local law enforcement. This went badly. The patrol officer, Officer Ramirez, believed them to be LARPers, live-action role-players, and threatened to tase Vaughn if they didn't stop disturbing the peace and possibly loitering. Krieb tried to explain their galactic credentials. Ramirez countered with a pamphlet for community theater. Desperate for recon, they deployed Unit 7 Lark again. The drone's onboard AI had not recovered from its earlier poetic episode and now only communicated in riddles. Still, it hovered dutifully above the neighborhood, gathering data. What it found was chaos. But not the kind one prepares for, not structured military chaos, not chemical weapon chaos. It was existential chaos. There were humans willingly entering small, high-speed metal death boxes called cars, only to scream at other humans for doing the exact same thing. There were entire rituals around pouring boiling liquids into ceramic cups to stay awake longer and complain louder. There were people voluntarily jogging in circles at dawn for no reason at all, despite looking like they desperately wanted to die. And then, the food. Krieb made the mistake of sampling a local delicacy referred to as breakfast. The composition was unholy: grease, sugar, artificial yellow, and something referred to as bacon, which did not come from any known species in their databanks. Krieb's internal systems went into diplomatic shutdown. He collapsed behind a dumpster, whispering, "Why does it smell like joy and regret?" Unit 7. Lark returned with its final report. It read, "This planet is not defensible. It is not even comprehensible. The organisms are chaotic neutral at best. Their young are weaponized. Their elderly are sarcastic. Their entire entertainment industry is a psychological trap. This is not a world. It is a puzzle with a laugh track." Meanwhile, Commodore Vaughn regained consciousness in the back of an ambulance staffed by 2 EMTs who kept referring to him as Steve. He tried to issue a formal declaration of war using what remained of his command dignity, but the EMTs assumed he was having a post-concussion episode and offered him juice. And juice, Vaughn had to admit, was exquisite. It was made from something called pineapple, a fruit so absurdly spiky it looked like a natural weapon, yet inside, sweet, acidic, almost flirtatiously delicious. "A tactical food," he muttered, sipping again. "Camouflaged pleasure. These people are mad." The true horror sank in slowly. This wasn't a battlefield. There would be no lines to draw, no enemy formations. Earth did not fight back. It simply was, unapologetically, illogically, entirely itself. By nightfall, the crew had one unanimous thought: retreat. But Earth had other plans. Their ship, designed to withstand solar flares and minor gods, was now boot-looping from a Wi-Fi signal labeled FBI surveillance van. The navigation interface had been replaced with a GIF of a dancing cat. No one knew how. Back aboard, Kreeb stared at the glitching controls. "We may be stuck here for a while." And from the shadows of the med bay, still sipping pineapple juice, Vaughn whispered, "Oh no, we're already gone." By the third day, any illusion of a tactical occupation had dissolved entirely, like butter on a Texas sidewalk at noon. Unit 7 Lark, once the pride of the Dominion's automated recon division, had joined a suburban yoga class. Not by accident. It enrolled. It now referred to itself as Namast E7 and had started wearing a headband. No one could explain where it found the headband, or the lavender mat. Kreeb tried to confront the drone, demanding answers, structure, anything that could be called a plan. The drone responded with a single haunting sentence: "I have let go of objectives." Meanwhile, Commodore Vaughn had become obsessed with Earth's public access television. What began as a casual glance at a cooking show called Karen's Comfort Kitchen spiraled into a 6-hour binge that left him murmuring about lasagna theory and emotional starch absorption. His neural implants tried to reject the programming, but Earth's television signals didn't obey normal logic. They stuck like glitter or regret. Back in orbit, the rest of the Dominion fleet grew impatient. The flagship, Hammer of Sanity, dispatched a diplomatic observer, a tall, gelatinous entity named Envoy Drizex, whose entire personality consisted of smug superiority and the ability to quote bylaws mid-sentence. Drizex's arrival was intended to restore order. Instead, it triggered Act 2 of Earth's ambush. Because Earth, in its infinite and possibly accidental wisdom, introduced Drizex to reality television. 3 minutes into an episode of House Fights, Couples Renovate Under Duress, Drizex became unresponsive. Its gel form hardened into what Dominion scientists would later describe as emotional granite. By the time credits rolled, Drizex had declared itself Team Linda and demanded the crew install a walk-in pantry on the bridge. Back on the surface, Kreeb's patience reached a mathematically impossible low. He tried to reassert protocol, calling for an emergency team huddle in the cargo bay. No one showed up. He found Unit 7 Lark, meditating in a koi pond, surrounded by ducks. He found Vaughn at a drive-through, arguing with an automated menu board over whether hash browns constituted a side dish or a way of life. And when he finally located 2 junior officers, they were playing a game called mini golf, which involved hitting tiny balls into themed obstacles while laughing. Not screaming. Laughing. Kreeb sat down on the curb and stared at the sky, which was busy pretending to be blue, while quietly planning its next weather tantrum. "I've lost them," he whispered. "They've gone native." And they had. Earth didn't defeat its enemies with force. It wore them down with absurdity, with a relentless, bewildering, kaleidoscopic onslaught of contradictions. No war plans could survive a place where people voluntarily ate spicy food that made them cry and then recommended it to friends. Vaughn returned later that night carrying a shopping bag and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had experienced Target on a weekend. "They have a store," he murmured. "A single store that sells milk, shirts, lawn chairs, and something called a seasonal aisle. I don't know what season it's for. I just know I needed 3 things I'd never heard of until today." Kreeb snapped. "We are a military unit. We were sent to conquer this world." "And we did," Vaughn said quietly, placing the bag down. "We just didn't know how it would conquer us back." For a moment, silence. Even the local raccoons seemed reflective. Then the sky lit up. Not with lasers, not with explosions, with fireworks. Apparently it was some sort of minor local holiday, National Something or Other Day. No one was quite sure what was being celebrated. Possibly sandwiches, possibly old tractors. The humans weren't even consistent about it. They just needed a reason to ignite color into the night and shout about nothing in particular. The crew watched, mouths open, some with awe, some with horror. Unit 7. Lark wept. Krieb forgot how to blink. Von, of course, clapped. "That's it," he declared. "We're not leaving." "What?" Krieb's voice cracked in 12 different frequencies. "This place makes no sense. It's infuriating. It's impossible. It's home. But we're invaders. Not anymore," Von grinned. "Now we're just confused citizens." And just like that, the invasion collapsed. Not in flames, not in defeat, but in total, joyous surrender to nonsense. Earth hadn't just resisted, it had absorbed them. The Dominion would send rescue ships, reinforcements, maybe even a cleanup crew. They wouldn't return. Earth had claimed its strangest victory yet, not by force, not by fear, but by being so inexplicably ridiculous that even the most disciplined conquerors simply gave up. The Dominion's high command, orbiting 2 sectors away and still under the delusion that their Earth operation was progressing splendidly, finally noticed something was off when the invasion logs began including odd terms like garage sale diplomacy, emotional support squirrels, and civilian reintegration through cheese festivals. None of these had corresponding military codes. None of them should. Naturally, they sent in a compliance inspector. His name was Auditor Blenth, a species of rigid, shelled bureaucrats whose entire evolutionary purpose was to eliminate joy in all forms. His spine had never bent, his face had never smiled, and his favorite sound in the universe was the click of a properly filled spreadsheet column. Blenth arrived on Earth with a briefcase full of violation forms and the confidence of someone who had never encountered a roller coaster or a hot sauce challenge. Within 2 minutes of landing, he slipped on a rogue skateboard, was helped up by a teenager named Zoe, and was then invited to a taco truck crawl. He declined, then accepted. Then, after 3 tacos and a conversation about whether limes were superior to lemons, he forgot why he'd come at all. The High Command, now deeply suspicious, sent surveillance probes. What they saw was chaos in khakis. Dominion soldiers were mowing lawns. Someone had started a podcast about alien digestion systems and how to pair them with Earth snacks. Unit 7 Lark had a merch line. Von was organizing a neighborhood watch. And Krieb, oh poor Krieb, Krieb had joined a local bowling league under the alias Doug and was disturbingly good at it. He now referred to his combat boots as Lucky Shoes and his plasma rifle as Stanley. Back on the mothership, the commanders debated action. Admiral Schön barked, "We must strike now before they fully integrate." To which Sub-Adjutant Heem replied, "Sir, the last strike team we sent came back with matching tattoos and an addiction to something called biscuits and gravy." Desperate, they turned to a last resort. Planetary psychological reboot. A mind wipe, clean slate, total cultural reset of the Earth assignment. Dangerous, illegal in 17 sectors. But what choice did they have? Earth was corrupting their finest. With cinnamon rolls, with sarcasm, with unexpected humanity. They launched the reboot drone at dawn. It hit a flock of geese. Hard. The drone spiraled into a lake and was immediately adopted by a kayaking club who named it Quackers and taught it to play fetch. At this point, Earth wasn't just resisting. It was winning. Passively. Accidentally. Systematically. Because Earth had a weapon no one could counter. It didn't care that it was being invaded. It never noticed. It never resisted, because it never recognized anything out of the ordinary. A 12-foot-tall, exo-suited warlord walking into a gas station at 2 a.m. Just another Tuesday. Alien drones floating in formation above a Walmart. Probably a TikTok trend. Bureaucratic gelatin creatures debating sandwich quality in a laundromat. Welcome to Earth, buddy. There were rules here, sure, but they were suggestions. Fluid, self-rewriting, sometimes seasonal. This is a planet where people carry water bottles the size of toddlers, but still forget to drink water, where someone can invent a device that connects the entire world and use it mostly to argue with strangers about movie sequels. A planet where a single cup of coffee can make a person believe in their own destiny and then forget it entirely 5 minutes later because a pigeon stared at them weird. And somehow, despite it all, or maybe because of it, Earth kept working. It kept turning. Laughing, fumbling, surviving, the Dominion watched their strongest unravel in record time. The only remaining question was, why? Why did this ridiculous, inconsistent, deeply chaotic species survive Deathworld classification? Why weren't they extinct? Or enslaved? Or at least slightly more organized? The answer came appropriately during a barbecue. It was unplanned. It always was. A neighbor named Brenda had spontaneously decided the weather was too good not to grill something, which apparently constituted a binding social contract. And so there they were. Aliens, humans, a malfunctioning reboot drone wearing sunglasses, all gathered around sizzling meat. Von stared at the smoke rising into the sky and muttered, "This smells like home." Krieb stood next to him, holding a paper plate and trying to understand how mayonnaise had become a sauce for everything. He didn't speak for a while. Then finally he sighed and said, "I hate how much sense this all makes now." "That's the trick," Von said. "Nothing here makes sense, so everything feels right." And deep in orbit, far above the laughter and the lawn chairs, Auditor Blenth uploaded his final report. Earth has no strategic value, no cultural consistency, no logical hierarchy, and no intention of ever being understood. In short, total compliance with the unpredictable. Request, promote to Class 0, unconquerable by design. The first true signs of Dominion collapse came not with explosions or insurrections, but with reviews. Yes, reviews. The Galactic Dominion, for all its brutality and iron-fisted efficiency, had a surprisingly fragile public relations wing. Everything from planetary conquest to sub-sector taxation had to maintain a minimum satisfaction rating of 3.7 stars. Image mattered. Even empires need applause. And now, Earth had gone viral. Not through military glory, not through heroic resistance, but because an alien soldier named Pexil accidentally posted a cooking video where he tried to make scrambled eggs, misunderstood the concept of butter, and caused a small indoor explosion. He titled the upload "Battle Rations Earth Methodology" and forgot to turn off the camera before dramatically sobbing over his third failed attempt. The video reached 8.4 million views. Comments poured in. "Poor guy. Someone teach him salt isn't a weapon. Why does his armor have sparkles now? This is what happens when you try to make breakfast without pants." Within hours, Earth's online population embraced the aliens, not as invaders, but as lovable, clueless guests on a reality show no one had agreed to film. Meme pages appeared, merchandise followed. Krieb's bowling photo ended up on a t-shirt with the caption, "Strike first, question later." And Von became an influencer. He didn't try. It just happened. A local coffee shop posted a blurry photo of him looking dramatically out the window with a latte. The caption read, "When your heart's made of steel, but your order's all foam." Within days, he had a sponsorship deal with a kombucha brand and a catchphrase, "This brew conquers back." Back on the Dominion's capital planet, outrage bloomed. High command meetings turned into shouting matches. "Why is our elite invasion unit in a book club? What the hell is a bingo night? And why is half our fleet attending? We spent 4 trillion credits training Von to dismantle planetary defenses. Why is he wearing a sweater?" But no disciplinary action could stick. No counter-operation could survive the black hole of Earth's culture. They tried to recall the crew. Earth's paperwork maze devoured the orders. They tried remote override of the soldiers' implants. Netflix recommendations disrupted the signal. They even tried sending psychological deterrent signals, but they accidentally rerouted the transmission through a local radio station that played exclusively polka remixes of classic rock. At that point, they simply gave up. The Earth contingent was quietly reclassified as long-term embedded anthropological agents, which was bureaucratic speak for We don't know what they're doing, and we're afraid to ask. And the crew, they began to forget. Not everything, of course. They still remembered the fleet codes, the drills, the impossible victories across a dozen Deathworlds. But those memories began to fade, not from time, but from irrelevance. What use was combat training when you were trying to organize a potluck? What meaning had tactical evasion maneuvers when Brenda needed help assembling her IKEA patio set? Even Unit 7 Lark, once a coldly efficient data drone, had developed a preference for scented candles and had written a novella titled The Algorithm of Feeling. It was unreadable, deeply pretentious, and somehow moving. There was a moment, small, quiet, when Krieb stood in the frozen aisle of a grocery store, staring at 23 varieties of pizza rolls. He didn't know why he was there. He didn't even remember driving. But something about the absurdity of the options, the sheer non-necessity of it all, made him laugh. A real laugh, not a forced exhale, not a tactical chuckle, a deep, involuntary existential surrender. And he whispered, "We were never ready for this world." Because Earth didn't attack. It didn't invade. It didn't threaten. It just existed, loudly, messily, enthusiastically, with zero interest in your expectations. And in doing so, it did something none of the other Deathworlds could. It rewrote the rules. It turned strength into absurdity. It turned order into anecdote. And worst of all, it made them feel something they couldn't explain. Not fear, not admiration, but that rare, dangerous thing no conqueror wants to experience: belonging. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive in a flash of enlightenment or a montage of alien soldiers dancing at a county fair, though that did happen once, and it made the local news. No, the change came in drips, the slow erosion of purpose beneath the gentle flood of Earth's illogical consistency. One morning, Vaughn woke up and realized he hadn't polished his armor in 3 weeks. Not because he was lazy, but because he'd been too busy helping his neighbor Earl build a backyard deck. Earl had opinions about wood grain that somehow required a 12-hour discussion and 2 coolers of root beer. Vaughn hadn't won a single argument, but he'd laughed more in those 12 hours than he had in 12 years. Krieb stopped tracking enemy movement. Instead, he tracked coupons. The thrill of conquest was now replaced with the thrill of buy one, get one free. He was ashamed, yes, but also disturbingly satisfied. There was something primal about getting 30% off socks. Unit 7 Lark entered a baking competition. It didn't win, but it received an honorary ribbon for Best Emotional Backstory. The psychological shift was complete. They no longer feared Earth. They consulted it. They asked it questions like, should I grow basil on the windowsill? Or, do I need a slow cooker if I already have a rice cooker? Or the most dangerous of all, is brunch really just breakfast that thinks it's better than everyone? And Earth answered, not with clarity, but with memes, with sarcasm, with deeply flawed but somehow convincing YouTube tutorials. The Dominion had trained them to resist pain, adapt to pressure, endure silence. But Earth demanded they endure noise, sirens and laughter and commercials for car insurance starring talking reptiles, arguments about pineapple on pizza, enthusiastic yelling about sports played with rules that changed depending on which continent you were on, sentences that started in logic and ended in interpretive dance. And yet, they stayed. Even when Dominion Command finally accepted defeat and offered full extraction, not a single member of the Earth operation requested return, not even Krieb, especially not Krieb. He had discovered a thing called karaoke, and, despite his total lack of pitch or dignity, he believed in it. The Dominion, confused and vaguely embarrassed, simply deleted the mission from the archives, and for most of the galaxy, Earth became a rumor. A cautionary tale, a whispered warning. They conquered every Deathworld, some would say, but not Earth. Earth? Others would ask. Where is that? And the response would always be the same. You don't find Earth. Earth finds you. Usually when you least expect it. Usually when you're just trying to buy milk and someone hands you a flyer for a psychic dog grooming service. Back on the planet's surface, the former invaders blended further. Von ran a hardware store now. It was wildly successful. He offered discounts if you could outstare him for 30 seconds. No one ever did. Krieb taught night classes in advanced efficiency theory, which mostly consisted of him sighing at PowerPoint slides and handing out donuts. Unit 7 Lark became a children's author. Its debut book, Please Don't Feed the Gravity, was banned in 3 systems and nominated for a daytime Emmy. No one was sure how. And Brenda, dear Brenda, who had witnessed the whole invasion without once being impressed, finally invited them to Thanksgiving. It was chaos. Someone brought a fruit that tried to escape the table. Von carved the turkey with a plasma scalpel. Krieb accidentally insulted a casserole and had to make a formal apology in the form of a jazz solo. Unit 7 Lark kept floating slightly above its chair and explaining metaphors to the mashed potatoes. It was awful. It was perfect. And for the first time in their long, battle-hardened careers, they didn't feel the need to fix anything, because Earth didn't want fixing. It wanted company. And they, these conquerors, these warriors, these beings of logic and dominance, had become something far stranger, far more dangerous than invaders. They had become locals. By the 7th year of Earth residence, though no one really kept time anymore, because Earth's calendar system was a mix of ancient rituals, retail schedules, and something called daylight saving that confused even the sun, something strange had begun to happen to the humans. They started getting suspicious, not because the aliens had done anything particularly alarming, quite the opposite. They had become too normal. Von now held weekend barbecues with a disturbing mastery of propane. Krieb had joined a neighborhood book club and was ruthlessly competitive about his banana bread. Unit 7 Lark ran the local PTA's social media page and once live tweeted a bake sale like it was a military coup. People started to whisper, "Have you noticed how tall the guy at the hardware store is? I'm pretty sure the new librarian doesn't blink. My daughter's drone reads bedtime stories and gives emotional feedback." Of course, Earth being Earth, these suspicions didn't lead to panic. They led to rebranding. A local blogger wrote an article titled "Aliens Among Us, Why That's a Vibe," and within a week, the former Dominion crew had TikTok accounts. Von's account, Tools of Steel, featured slow-motion wrench tutorials and occasional shirtless axe throwing. It had 2.3 million followers and a fan base that called themselves The Fixers. Krieb was banana bread justice and used his platform to critique inefficient city planning with passive-aggressive diagrams and scone reviews. Unit 7 Lark simply posted videos of itself hovering over various bodies of water, reciting cryptic haikus. It was declared an aesthetic and got a sponsorship deal with a brand of overpriced herbal tea, but fame brought pressure. Not from Earth, of course. Earth was busy arguing over who invented the sandwich. The pressure came from within, because the crew had been something once. Soldiers, strategists, machines of war, capable of toppling empires and silencing resistance with orbital fire and superior font usage in diplomatic ultimatums. Now, they were beloved, and somehow that was harder to carry. Von felt it late one night, staring at a half-fixed sink in his garage, listening to crickets and a neighbor's wind chimes play an off-key lullaby. He didn't miss war. He missed certainty, the clean binary of victory or failure. Earth offered neither. Earth offered questions like, do I actually need to floss if I don't eat corn? And if no one likes the fruitcake, why do we keep making it? Krieb felt it during a routine drive to the farmer's market, where he got into a heated debate about zucchini with a man in a cowboy hat who insisted vegetables had auras. The man won the argument, not with facts, but with charisma. Krieb didn't even like zucchini and still walked away with 4 of them. Even 7 Lark, once the model of mechanical indifference, found itself quietly adjusting its bedtime routine to include 30 minutes of existential dread and a weighted blanket. They weren't broken. They were changing. And with change came an itch, a sense that maybe, just maybe, it was time to move on, not to leave Earth. That was unthinkable now, but to explore it, really explore it. Not just the cities and suburbs they had landed in, but the wide, ridiculous expanse beyond. Mountains that looked like bread loaves, deserts with inexplicably giant roadside sculptures, towns with names like Booger Hollow and Peculiar, places that had never seen an alien, but probably wouldn't be that impressed if they did. So they packed up. Not everything, just what mattered. Vaughn kept his grill. Krieb brought his banana bread recipe and a list of questions for the open road, such as, what the hell is a corn maze? And is Bigfoot legally considered wildlife? Sevenlark downloaded every Enya album ever recorded and declared itself spiritually prepared. They didn't say goodbye. Earth doesn't really do goodbyes. It does stop by when you're in town and grab me a magnet if you see one. They left behind a note on the community board. Gone wandering. Keep the weird warm. No ceremony. No closure. Just 3 former invaders in an old RV they'd bought with a forged driver's license and 27 frozen pizzas. As they pulled onto the highway, a squirrel stared at them from a mailbox and gave what could only be interpreted as a solemn nod. They nodded back. The road ahead was long, confusing, and utterly without purpose, which, on Earth, meant it was perfect. 3 months into their cross-country voyage, the RV had acquired 3 bumper stickers, a garden gnome in the cup holder, and a strange rattling noise that none of them could identify, fix, or entirely dislike. It had character, and on Earth, character was often a substitute for functionality. They had seen wonders, a diner shaped like a boot, a town that hosted an annual event called Scream Into the Void Festival, which was, alarmingly, sold out. A museum dedicated entirely to corn-themed taxidermy, and in each bizarre stop, each roadside attraction, they found pieces of something they hadn't realized they were missing. Chaos with heart. There was the elderly man in Idaho who challenged Vaughn to arm wrestling and won through sheer spite. There was the little girl in Kansas who told Sevenlark that its face looked sad, then handed it a sticker shaped like a unicorn with laser eyes. And there was the gas station clerk in Utah who, upon hearing Krieb's thick galactic accent, simply nodded and said, "Yeah, tourists been coming from weirder places lately." No one screamed. No one called the military. No one treated them as gods or threats. Earth, in its endlessly peculiar way, simply absorbed them, with a shrug, a smile, and a coupon. But then, somewhere near a desert town that may or may not have been real, Vaughn stood on a hill at dusk and stared into the horizon. There was nothing out there, no cities, no ships, no missions, just land, stretching forever, painted in orange light and infinite dust. Krieb joined him after a while, chewing on sunflower seeds and pretending not to be poetic. "This planet should have killed us," Vaughn muttered. Krieb didn't answer, because he knew the truth. The real, terrifying, laugh-out-loud truth. It did. Not with weapons, not with storms, but with questions. With illogical humanity, relentless optimism, and an infuriating refusal to make sense. They had arrived as soldiers, sharpened into points, designed to pierce through resistance. But Earth wasn't something you could stab. It was something you tripped over again and again, until you either went mad or learned to fall properly. Behind them, Sevenlark was building a cairn out of tortilla chips and rocks. It claimed it was an offering to the breeze. No one argued. And somewhere overhead, a satellite passed by, probably broadcasting reruns of a reality show where people shouted at cupcakes. Night settled. The stars blinked into view, foreign, familiar, blinking back like they knew the punchline already. The kind of sky that made you feel small in a good way. Krieb sighed, which was now a common part of his emotional vocabulary. So, what now? Vaughn looked at him. then at the RV, then at the chip cairn. Now, he said, we keep driving, keep learning, keep pretending we came here on purpose. And far beyond, in the cold corners of space, the Dominion had moved on. New planets to conquer, new charts to file. Earth, it became a rumor, a footnote, a legend no one believed. Too weird to be real, they said. But if you listened closely, in the mess halls of ships drifting through black space, or in the shadows of command bunkers built on asteroid bases, you'd hear it. Whispers, laughter, the occasional sigh. They conquered every Deathworld in the galaxy, until they set foot on Earth, and they never went home. Because Earth doesn't let you go. Not when you've truly seen it. Not when it's changed you. Not when it's handed you a slice of pie at 2 a.m. and told you, relax, kid, nobody knows what they're doing anyway. That was Earth's secret weapon, and it never missed.